Well, howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Been a few days. I've got some equipment changes I want to share with you. Some changes to the rack, some changes to how I do my infrastructure here at Unky Joe's Playhouse. And we had a new piece of equipment come in, so let's get to that video right now. So what we have here is a Dell, another one, PowerEdge R210 Model 2. I came across a deal on eBay and just could not pass it up. Now this unit I got, I think it has the E3 1220 processor. We'll look that up here shortly. But it came with 8 gig of RAM and 2 500 gig hard drives. Also has an iDRAC controller in it, the Enterprise iDRAC, so I didn't have to purchase that. And it's going to run Server 2019 with Hyper-V running. And the plan was to put my domain controller on here, the surveillance software on here, and then any virtual machines that I needed to run my day-to-day activity for the business in a sleek, slim, efficient, power-saving server. Suffice it to say, what I did was I kept one of the 500 gig spinning drives in this unit and then moved the 1 terabyte SSD drive over. And then installed the operating system, installed the surveillance software, and installed the virtual machines on here, like my phone system, and then a couple of virtual machines, Windows 10 virtual machines, that I make available to outside users. The only problem with this unit is, like I said, it only came with 8 gig of RAM. So what we're going to do today is go ahead and upgrade it to 16 gig. Then we'll put it back into the rack. And then I'll show you how I have that configured and some other changes in the rack configuration. So we'll give you the top-down view. So the CD-ROM drive is here, and underneath this is the 1 terabyte SSD. It's got a couple of USB ports right here, so if we were to use ESXi or a FreeNAS, we could boot off a USB key. There's a 500 gig spinning hard drive right here. That's the boot drive. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 fans, 1 on the power supply, 2 on the CPU and RAM, and 1 to cool everything else. Now, what I did add is a Mellanox 10 gig card because I want this machine to have 10 gig connectivity, and then right next to that is the iDRAC controller that this unit came with. So the other thing I did was I noticed this thing, I thought it was running a little hot. It was running between 70 and 78 degrees C, and to me that just seems a little bit warm. So the other day, let me take the cover off. I took this CPU cooler off, and the thermal paste underneath it was all dried out and horrible. And so I went ahead and replaced the thermal paste. But it made very little difference in the temperature. So my thought is perhaps this unit just runs a little warm. The fans do ramp up and down as required, and I guess they keep it within Dell's specifications because they're not overheating. So the RAM that's in here right now, this RAM is tricky on these Dells, on this, especially on this R210. So here's the RAM module I have in there right now, and these are Kingston RAM modules. We'll see if the camera will focus on that. So I had a little trouble confidently finding RAM for this unit. Now these are 2 4 gig sticks. Let me put this module back in. Now what I'm going to do is add this new RAM to the server because I want to be able to use the 8 gig as well. So here's the RAM I got, and as you can see, it's the same, pretty much the same module. I ordered 2 more of the 4 gig sticks, so I'll get a total of 16 gig in here. 4 times 4 is 16. So we're going to go ahead and put these in, and then we're going to put the cover on this unit. We're going to see if it posts and goes into the OS. And 16 gig of RAM should be plenty. I could have gone with 32 on this unit, but frankly I didn't want to spend the money. This will just have a couple of virtual machines running at any one time. Mainly it's for the surveillance software. But you know, running Hyper-V on it as well gives me the ability to also run virtual machines on there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and button the unit back up, and then I'm going to plug it in, and then we're going to see if it posts. All right, so let's power it on. See if it goes through the post. It's a noisy little bugger. Well, that's a good sign. We're getting a post. Let me see if I can get the camera to autofocus. Now, too much light, folks. Trust me, though, we're getting a post. And you heard it boot up. And I guess we can go over to my machine over on the bench. So, shout out to Willie Howe. He sent me this hat about a year ago. And it's almost June, so this is going to be my official hat that I'm going to wear for June. Yeah, I know it's silly, but it's all I've got. Give it to me, folks. Okay, so here are the specs. And as you can see, if you look over there at core temp, the temperatures are getting, they're jumping up to 76, back down to 70. Now, the CPU is also under load, but you do see we have our 16 gig of RAM now available. It is an E3 1220 Sandy Bridge 3.3 gigahertz quad-core CPU. Strangely enough, I left the baffle the baffle that you saw me take off. When I put the cover back on, I looked over there and noticed I'd forgotten to put the baffle back on. And it's not really making any change in the temperatures, but it is seeing the RAM. So this unit is running Blue Iris software. So if we come in here under processes, I've set Blue Iris to run up as a service. So anytime I log into the machine, it runs Blue Iris in the background. And Blue Iris is, I've got, what do I have on there? 6 cameras now running on Blue Iris. So, that's why I put it on here. Because, this is a very power efficient server. If I look over right now under load, it's pulling about 70 watts. This unit, like I say, runs Blue Iris, and it hosts my phone my virtual PBX running free PBX, and it hosts a couple of Windows 10 machines that I make available to people outside of the company, and it's there specifically for that task. So I got the deal on this Dell, and I just couldn't pass it up and grabbed it, and then we just upgraded the RAM in it so I can get a few more virtual machines up and running on it. But there you go. I just wanted you to see it up and running in action. All right, so as I said, this is the cover, the baffle that I forgot to put back on. So this unit's getting ready to go back in the rack. So I'll let you watch me do this. It's a little tricky to get these. You'll hear it if I push here on this button. You'll hear it. You hear it snap, and then I just push on the front to get it off. All right, go ahead and put our baffle back in place. Yeah, why the temperatures are running at 78C, I don't know, but I'm not going to worry about it. And then you just slide it back on with a snap. All right, so I'm going to get this reinstalled back into the rack, and then we will do a tour of the rack. So if you hadn't guessed, this is my watchdog, and her name is Zira, and she's an old girl. She's about 10 now, 9 or 10, but she is real good at watching Daddy work, aren't you, girl? Yeah, she's like, this is what I do best. Now, I've taught her a trick. So instead of just yelling at my dog and telling it to get out of the way, I go, "Scoose piece." She's so smart. So let's go look at the rack, and we'll start at the top. You've seen the patch panel before, but I prefer to use a Keystone jacks in my patch panel. I just prefer it that way. I've got a 24-port Unify switch up above. I have a 10 gig switch down below that was so graciously donated. And also that I have a PoE switch right here. This runs my camera switch system, also donated. I've got a couple of HD home run tuners there and there, and then I have my trusty Synology NAS. And as you notice, I've started labeling everything, so I've actually got labels on these because Jerry and I are constantly looking in the rack and going, what did we call that unit? So this is my backup internet connection because I do use a pfSense firewall, but I have this Unify here just in case something happens to the pfSense or I need to do maintenance and still need the internet up. So it's like a failover. All right, so the top unit here is that Dell that we just put the RAM into, and that's called MS-HV1. That stands for Microsoft Hypervisor 1. I'm going to go ahead and power that unit back on now that it's in the rack. Let it boot up. We have another Dell R210 Model 2 underneath it that was donated, and that is running my pfSense firewall. Then the 4U unit under that is called Hermes, and that is running my Synology NAS for my home audio, video, and photos. And then if we come down lower on the rack, this first Dell here is a Dell R710, and that one is the unit with 3.5-inch spinning drives. This is running XCP. So it's running XCP, and we call it XCP-HV2. Underneath that is another Dell server. This is the 2.5-inch unit, and that one is running Hypervisor, Microsoft Hypervisor, and Windows Server 2019. We call that MS-HV3, and then underneath that is the IBM X3650 Model 3, and that one is running Server 2019 as well. We call that Microsoft-HV2 or MS-HV2. So that is the current status of the rack. Now, this IBM has a total of 4 SAS drives in it. I think they're 140 gig apiece. The Dell above it has 2 spinning 130 gig hard drives, and then a 1 terabyte notebook hard drive or a laptop hard drive in there. And then the unit above it has got 6. It's got 5 2 terabyte and 1 terabyte drive in an array. And we'll cover that in a later video, but that is running XCP-NG 7.6. So there you go. There's the rack at a glance. All right, so we have the server back in the rack, and Blue Iris has come up, and again, I got the baffle back on, and the temperatures are fine now. They start rising, and like I said, you'll see as the video progresses, they get up to about 78 C, which is, you know, I'd prefer them to run cooler, but I am not going to obsess about this. It could be that Dell runs these CPUs a little hotter for whatever reason. I don't know. I just a guess. The other thing I want to do, though, is go ahead and go into Hyper-V Manager and get my my phone system back up and running, because it is running as a virtual machine in here. And you can see I've only got 2 virtual machines in here. I've got the PBX, and I've got a Windows 10 unit virtualized. That is for my partner to connect up and use remotely. So I'm going to go ahead and open this one up and see if we can get her to start up so I can get phone service back here at my office. That would be nice. I've been running free PBX in a virtual machine for, well, it's how I prefer to run my PBX, and it works just fine. The thing I like about these Dells, the 210s, is they're really power efficient. And for a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week server, they make a lot more sense keeping them running than do the larger Dells. Because the larger Dells, you know, consume a couple hundred, maybe 300 watts of power apiece when they're running full bore. And if I'm not using them to their full extent, why have them running all the time? And they are lab units. So now, you're probably wondering what we did with the other server that I had specifically built. But we put that to another task. We're going to make it an XCP-NG server. All right, so free PBX is now up and running, so we should be good to go. We'll come back here and close that out, and you'll see now the temperatures have climbed back up on the CPU. But again, not going to obsess about it. And that most of this is due to Blue Iris, the surveillance software. I've run Blue Iris in a virtual machine before, but I prefer Blue Iris running at the root of the file server. It just seems to perform a little bit better. And I've got videos out there about how I've configured Blue Iris and how it records how I've got it recording to the hard drive. And that's why I've got that 1 terabyte SSD in here, is so that it can have quick reads and writes to that SSD for the surveillance system. And what I've ended up doing, and I'll tell you that here in a minute. So let's see, what else about the Dell do we need to know? Yeah, I think I paid $179 for it on eBay, including shipping. And yeah, I'm very happy with the purchase. Like I said, I really like these little Dells, these little R210s. They're really good little servers, and they should serve me well for quite a few years. Now, if you remember that server, that R210, the previous model, housed my domain controller. And I came to a decision the other day to not run a Microsoft Active Directory domain controller because I wanted to play with Synology's version of their Active Directory server for Windows domain. So that's what we've done. I've actually set up, as you can see there on the desktop, the directory server for Windows domain. I went out and created a new domain called mcstx.local, and I was able to get it up and running. And then I was able to convert with a profile editing tool my mcs.local profiles over to the new domain. So since the Synology is on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I saw no need to have a virtual Windows server running as a domain controller when I could use the function of Synology to do that. So that's what we've done here. And part and parcel of that is it also installs a DNS server. Now, the other thing that kind of irritated me, although Microsoft Windows DHCP server is a fine bit of software, I wasn't real happy with how I could manage my DHCP leases. So while the Synology is now running Active Directory and DNS, I have put the DHCP server over on my pfSense firewall and let that handle all of my leases. So here we are over on pfSense, and like I said, I've moved my DHCP over to here and let it control it through pfSense. I just get a little. I like the interface for the DHCP server on pfSense better than I do the Microsoft Windows one. And in my goal to embrace open source software, well, pfSense is kind of open source, but you get my point. I wanted to use the pfSense DHCP server. I just find it easier to manage and maintain, and I can see all my leases at a glance, and it just seems to handle them better than the Microsoft Windows server did. So we've moved our Active Directory domain controller now over to Synology right here, and we've let it handle DNS and Active Directory. And then I've allowed pfSense then to be my DHCP server. And for me, it works out really well. And even though I'm running the Blue Iris, as you can see, the Blue Iris software works really good. There's my mom having a cup of coffee and my other half watching TV mindlessly. And but yeah, I can go through all the cameras and it works just fine. There's no hesitation. I can just... Here's my office camera. You can see me waving at you. This is an old camera I'm going to be getting rid of, but I just moved it to the office temporarily. And there's my den, and there's my kitchen, and here's my front porch. And the front porch, as you know, is a work in progress. But anyway, there you go. It's working well. Now, one oddity I did notice, prior to installing Active Directory and DNS on the Synology NAS, I was getting 100 megabit per second transfer rates on to this Synology NAS. And now I'm getting around 60 or 70 when I copy data to or from the NAS. Now, the other thing I did was I had a problem. I won't go into it too much. It was a mistake on my part where I tried to I was going to play around with Synology and run their virtual machine manager, and I did a little test on it, wasn't really happy with the performance. This This Synology NAS I have is not really powerful enough to run virtual machines on, so I gave up the ghost on that. But in the process of doing that, I forgot that I had bonded network connections, that I had them combined together. And so I had to break the bond in order to get back into the Synology NAS. It was a big kerfuffle. I'm not going to go into it, but suffice it to say I learned a very hard lesson that day. Now, I have not rebonded the connections. As you can see, LAN 1 is the only one in use. LAN 2 is currently not connected to anything. But I am going to go ahead and rebond these network interfaces. I'm going to create a bond out of the two of them and see if my speed comes back up. And if it does, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Let's see, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? All right, so we seem to have been able to do that. And what I basically did was went into my Unify 24 port main switch. And I chose port 23. It's 23 and 24 are the ones that I put together. And what you do is you click this to aggregate the two ports. What you want to do, though, is before you do that, you want to go into your Synology NAS, come here under Control Panel, go under Network, and create a bond. And this is it's very important you select this item right here, IEEE 802.3 AD Dynamic Link Aggregation. Don't make the mistake I did and choose this one. I forgot that you need to choose this one. So I chose this one incorrectly, had to reboot and reset the IP address on the Synology NAS because I lost the connection. So what you want to do is come in here and set this up first, create your bond of your ports, and then go to your Unify switch and set those ports to aggregate, and then all should be done. So now what I want to do is try to copy a file over to that server or from that server and see what kind of speed we get. So let's do that next. All right, so I have a 4 terabyte or 4 gigabyte file here I can copy. So let's right click, let's copy that, and I'm going to move that over to my D drive just temporarily. Do a paste. And no, we're still getting only 50 to 60 megabytes per second. And I think it has to do with the fact that we have now put Active Directory onto that Synology NAS. But I have no proof of that. I'm just sharing with you what I'm seeing here. But again, I have no proof that that is what is causing the issue. But as you can see, my transfer speeds have come down in the 60 megabyte range. So we'll have to do a little more research on this. Remember how I said I wasn't going to obsess about that? Looky there. I came across an article. Now, I've had to reset this Synology NAS, like I said, a week or two ago. And one of the settings that says to check is to make sure that maximum SMB is set to 3. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And it's going to restart the networking services. I'm going to apply it. And now, let's see what kind of transfer speeds we get. See if that made any difference at all. All right, so after making that change, you can see our transfer speeds are back up to almost 100 megabytes per second. So that's what it was during all this transition when I had foobarred my Synology box. I never came back and changed this setting back to SMB3. And you can see what a difference that makes between SMB2 and SMB3. So yay, my transfer speeds are back and we resolved it. Now I probably want to go out to my Exponology NAS and make sure that setting is changed on there as well, so that I can ensure we're going to have good transfer speeds. But as you can see, yeah, it's more than acceptable now, and we both learned something, right? So as I showed you in the video of the Dell R210, I also put a Mellanox 10 gig networking card in there, I should say. Now currently I only have that unit connected up via gigabit, but I am going to I am going to run a cable from the new switch to the 10 gig port on that server and get it configured. I just wanted to run it a few days with that new RAM in it, make sure everything's going to be stable. before moving forward. So when I do connect that up via 10 gig, I'll share that with you. We'll do another video on it, because I do need to do an updated video on my 10 gig networking and the status of it. So you got that to look forward to. So there you go, YouTube. We hope you found the video entertaining and informative. Please give us a thumbs up down below. Leave your comments in the comment section and donate if you're so inclined. We take PayPal. We take Patreon, either one. It's much quieter here at Unky Joe's Playhouse. As you know, we got the new air conditioner installed. It has been working wonderfully. In fact, Jerry and I were sitting in here the other day freezing our butts off, and it was 93 degrees outside. So the beauty of this unit is that it removes so much of the humidity that was in this room that even at a slightly higher temperature, as I've said before, it feels cooler than it did with that rattling window air conditioner. Now, that air conditioner is still in the window. We haven't removed it yet because I don't know where I'm going to put it. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Please don't forget that we will see you on the other side.